All right. Well, thank you, Lou, for that wonderful talk on such an important issue. I love Lou. He's such a great guy. He's so funny. But what I want to talk about today is Sherlock Holmes and the case of the missing Messiah. Now, how many of you guys love Sherlock Holmes? Let me see your hands out there. All right, lots of you guys. How many of you guys have seen the Robert Downey Jr. movies? Yeah, I love the Hans Zimmer soundtrack. All right, how about the BBC series with Benedict Cumberbatch? Fantastic. How many of you guys, and I'm going to really strain to see, have any of you guys read the actual classic books? Yeah, wow, look at that. I am absolutely shocked. I love those books. They are fantastic. If you like Sherlock but you've never read the books, go and check them out. And I just love the character of Sherlock. Why? Well, a few different reasons. One is he just cares about just the facts. Just the facts. That's what he wants. In one of the books, he says, "I have no data yet. It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. Insensibly, one begins to twist facts to suit theories instead of theories to suit facts." Amy or Ewing, please do not kill me for my horrible British accent. But what I would love to say is, what would happen is if the greatest detective of all time were to investigate the resurrection of Jesus? Is it just a cleverly devised hoax, or is there a chance that it could be true history? And that's what we're going to be talking about right now. So first I'm going to frame the issue about it and what it would mean for us. And then we're going to spend some time just looking at some of the specific data, and then we'll conclude by talking about what this means for all of us. But the first thing I think we need to say is just that this topic matters. Okay, the resurrection of Jesus matters. I think if Sherlock was investigating Christianity as a whole, he would start with the resurrection of Jesus. The question of the resurrection of Jesus is central. Why? It's often been described as the linchpin of Christianity. Jesus claimed a lot of things in his life. He claimed to be the Messiah. He claimed to be the Son of God. He claimed to be a miracle worker. But he staked his entire reputation on this one fact, that he would come back from the dead. He said, "I will die, I will be buried for 3 days, and then I will come back from life." If Jesus did not do that, it means he was a false prophet. It means he was not a good teacher, because good teachers teach true things. It means that all of us as Christians are idol worshipers, because we're worshiping somebody who is not actually God. And it means that all of Christianity falls apart. But if Jesus did rise from the dead, then he has done something that no mere man could possibly do, and it gives credibility to Jesus' message. So this is the linchpin of Christianity. This matters. So I think if Sherlock Holmes was investigating, he would consider the minimal facts case for the resurrection. And what these minimal facts are is the majority of historians all across the world, whether their background is Christian, non-Christian, atheist, agnostic, Jewish, whatever their background, regardless of their background, they agree to a certain number of facts about Jesus. There's a consensus about Jesus, about certain facts. Then we're going to look at 4 of those facts right now. 4 of those facts were that Jesus was dead, he was gone from the tomb, he was then seen by the apostles, and then this was all reported. All right, so just really quick, dead, gone, seen, and reported. Let's go ahead and dive in and examine these facts, and then we're going to ask the question, what explanation or what hypothesis could fit these facts? All right, so the first fact is that Jesus was dead on the cross. But for those of you familiar with the series, you know Inspector Lestrade. He's always coming up with theories, and he comes up with another brilliant theory to explain this fact. And he says, "Oh, I've seen that film of Princess Bride, and what if he was just mostly dead? All right, what if he was just mostly dead? What if he just fainted on the cross?" Now, this idea was accepted by some people on the interwebs. All right, it was popular by a lot of the trolls out there, that Jesus just fainted on the cross, and then later in the cool, damp tomb, he was revived, and he stumbled out of the tomb, and people thought that he came back to life. But today, basically all scholars have thrown out this as a possible explanation for this. Why? Well, one of the reasons is that the Romans were experts at killing. The Romans knew what they were doing. They had been perfecting the art of killing criminals for hundreds of years. And they invented this very way to kill criminals in a most excruciating way. So they would even face the penalty of death if they allowed somebody to escape the punishment that was due to them. I mean, talk about a stressful work environment, okay? You know they're gonna get the job done. All right, so Jesus was dead on the cross. The majority of scholars agree to that fact. What else? Well, Jesus was gone from the tomb 3 days later. Now, most scholars agree that Jesus was buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, in his personal tomb. As Cambridge scholar John A.T. Robinson has stated, the burial of Jesus is one of the most certain facts about the historical Jesus. Now, what's incredible is that the majority of historians, about 2/3 of them, also agree that that very tomb was empty 3 days later. Gary Habermas has recorded 23 historical arguments for the empty tomb. And let's go through each of them, and then we'll give you guys a break in about 2.5 hours, okay? Well, maybe let's just go with one of them, okay? One reason that we know that the tomb was empty is that the enemies of Jesus admitted that the tomb was empty. The resurrection of Jesus happened in the city of Jerusalem, the very city where Jesus was crucified and buried. If the tomb wasn't empty, the religious scholars would have gone to the tomb, taken his body, and paraded it through the streets and said, look, here is your resurrected Messiah. He's not so very alive after all. But that's not what they did. What they did instead was they said, oh, the disciples stole the body. The disciples stole the body. Now, Lestrade comes back in, and he says, see, they went and stole the body. Case settled, all right? That's it. We've solved it. No, nothing more to see here. Sherlock says, hold your horses, Lestrade. It's difficult to describe how many ways your hypothesis is incomplete. All right, as Lee Strobel points out, this is just a cover story to explain why the tomb is empty. All right, it's like saying you're on trial for murder, and you've been pushed to the limit, and eventually you just say, well, the only reason I killed them is that they wouldn't stop taunting me. All right, what you've done is you've admitted to murder, and then you've given a really bad explanation for why you did the murder, right? You haven't gotten yourself off the hook. Well, in the same way here, the religious authorities, they're trying to explain why the tomb is empty, and they're giving a horrible explanation for why it's empty. The disciples did not have the resources or the reason to try to steal the body, which was in a guarded tomb. And we're going to be talking about that more shortly. So the question remains, where is this missing Messiah? Well, we have two facts now. Jesus was dead on the cross. He was gone from the tomb. And then he was seen. Now, the apostles were convinced that they had seen Jesus rise from the dead. And we know this because of their willingness to die for that belief. They were willing to die for this idea that they had seen Jesus risen from the dead. Now, you might say, all right, but aren't there many different people who are willing to die for their religious beliefs? Right? We see suicide bombers. We see people who are willing to die for their religious beliefs. Well, there's two ways that this is different. The first is that there's a difference between hoping and knowing. People who die today die in the hope they will receive a reward in the afterlife or that their cause will go on. But the disciples were in a unique position of knowing whether they had seen Jesus alive or not. So that's the first way that it's different. And the second way is that this proves that they could not have stolen the body. They could not have been lying about it. Why? Because no one is willing to die for something that they know is a lie. The disciples, before they were crucified or burnt alive, would have said, wait, sorry, we were just kidding. We made it up. We're sorry, please don't kill us, okay? But that's not what they did. They went to their deaths proclaiming that Jesus had risen from the dead, and they were willing to sacrifice everything for this belief. But Inspector Lestrade is here to interject again, and he says, there's a much better explanation for these appearances. He says, they was hallucinating. They ate some moldy manna, okay? They were hallucinating. Watson, the medical man, chimes in here and says, my apologies, Lestrade, that just won't do. This theory has problems. First and foremost, hallucinations can't be shared. As Lee Strobel likes to say, you can't say to someone, how'd you like that dream I had last night? Right? You can't say that to somebody because it doesn't make any sense. Dreams are private occurrences that happen within our individual minds. The same thing is true for a hallucination. You can't share a hallucination with somebody else. So hallucination could not explain all the different appearances and witnesses of the resurrection. And the tomb is still empty. No matter how powerful hallucination is, I've never heard of one powerful enough to teleport a body out of a tomb. All right, so all of this, Jesus was dead, his body was gone from the tomb, he was then seen by the apostles, and then this was reported. Now Lestrade comes in with one final theory. He says, I've got it. It's just a fanciful story. They came up with it way later. None of them was even there. That just won't do, Lestrade. Others have thought of this before. It's called the legendary hypothesis. Now, the problem with this legendary hypothesis, this idea that over the centuries people came up with this bright idea that this Jewish scholar never died, that he actually rose from the dead, is that the earliest believers in Jesus believed that he rose from the dead. The earliest records that we have show that the earliest believers believed that he rose from the dead. The 1 Corinthians 15 creed is one example of this. And even skeptical scholars will admit that the creed that is found in 1 Corinthians 15 goes back to within months of the crucifixion. If the earliest followers of Jesus believed that he rose from the dead, it's impossible that it was a later addition that rose up through a legend. So given these pieces of evidence, which explanation is the best? Given that Jesus was dead on the cross, that his body was gone from the tomb, that he was then seen, and then this was all reported within the lifetime of the eyewitnesses. In light of these facts, which of these explanations is the most likely hypothesis to explain all of them? Could it be that Jesus just fainted on the cross? Again, this is not medically possible, and it didn't explain the transformation of the disciples. Could it be that the disciples just stole the body? Again, the disciples didn't have the motive, the means, or the opportunity to do something like that. And it's impossible given their willingness to die for their belief in the resurrection. Could it just be that they hallucinated that Jesus rose from the dead? Again, that's not how hallucinations work, and the tomb was still empty. Now, all of these hypotheses can only begin to explain one or two of these facts, and they fall far short of explaining all of them. I think instead, Sherlock would conclude with the explanation that fits all of them. Jesus actually rose from the dead. Now, is this a big belief? Absolutely. This is a big claim, but it's one that seems to best fit the evidence. I think Sherlock Holmes, after he collected the evidence, what would he do? Would he just go home and have a cup of tea? No, of course not. He's Sherlock Holmes. He's the greatest detective. Once he's collected the evidence, he settles on a conclusion. And once he finds that conclusion, he believes it to the end. I think that we need to do the same. This matters because of Jesus' claim. He claimed to be the Son of God. He claimed to be the Messiah. Why should we believe that? Because he rose from the dead. He's performed a miracle that no mere man could ever possibly accomplish. We need to listen to him when he claims to be the way, the truth, and the life. If Jesus is risen, it changes everything. Thank you for listening.